Go.
Welcome to this edition of the Techies webinar series. My name is Sujit John and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. The two of us will moderate the discussion. We hope you and your families are staying safe and doing well. Our hearts go out to those who have lost their loved ones battling COVID-19. Our discussion today is with two of the biggest startup success stories of our times, Swiggy and BigBasket. BigBasket was recently bought by the Tata Group for a valuation of some $2 billion. The pandemic and lockdowns have made these companies almost indispensable. Swiggy now comes to my home at least twice or thrice a week. Before this, it was just on the weekends. BigBasket has become the lifeline for many. Our discussion today is on the technology that is driving these platforms. And to discuss this, we have two very senior technologists with us. We have with us Mayank Talati. Mayank joined Swiggy over 2 years ago and is currently Senior Vice President of the Marketplace Fulfilment platform. The platform handles the entire post-order experience at Swiggy and consists of the delivery platform, the driver experience platform, and the CRM platform. Prior to joining Swiggy, Mayank had stints in Amazon, InMobi, Google, PayPal, Wind River Systems, and Microsoft. Wow. Welcome, Mayank.
Thank you. Thanks.
We have with us Rupesh Kumar. Rupesh is Senior Director of Engineering at BigBasket. Rupesh heads the engineering for BigBasket storefront, trying to build the best e-commerce experience at scale for customers. He has been with BigBasket for 3 years, during which he has led the architectural transformation to get the platform ready for the next level of scale. Prior to BigBasket, Rupesh spent 14 years at Adobe in engineering leadership roles, working on next-gen e-commerce platforms and server products to build modern web apps. Welcome, Rupesh.
Thank you. Thank you, Sujit. Glad to be here.
Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the Facebook comment box. Shilpa and I will put them to Mayank and Rupesh. Mayank and Rupesh, first question is for both of you. The pandemic and the lockdown saw a surge in online orders. Give us an idea of the extent of the increases that you saw and how did you manage this? How did you ensure your technology could scale? Mayank, you want to start?
Sure. So, just to start with, I think in the first pandemic, the first wave of COVID, we actually saw orders drop on the food platform. But in the second wave, right, we've actually seen orders surge on both the food platform and our grocery offering Instamart, and also Genie, right, which is our offering for our concierge service offering. Where you can get Swiggy driver partners to come pick up and drop anything, right? So in the first COVID wave, a lot of our effort actually went in making sure that our technology could help our drivers overcome some of the challenges that we saw with on-the-ground regulations, different regulations occurring at different points, containment zones that would be created by the police, right? So we had to have mechanisms in place where drivers could go hand off at a containment zone entrance, and then someone within that can go and carry it forward, right? And throughout, you have to manage your customer expectation for that. Most of our stack has been built over the last 2 years. Fortunately, we had invested a lot in our stack so that our stack will actually dynamically and horizontally scale for our volume, right? So we had systems in place where basically Swiggy is on AWS mostly. So as we saw more usage coming in, right, we'd automatically scale the number of servers. Most of our systems are horizontally scalable. And so we'd be able to ramp up very, very quickly. What we hadn't done, because we had seen demand increases in the previous 2 years keep going up, is we hadn't made a hardware dynamic in scaling down, right? But from a cost efficiency perspective, we had actually put some effort into making sure that our hardware became truly elastic, right? So if order volumes came down, then our stack would automatically scale itself down also. And that made us really, really cost efficient. In the first wave, being efficient in terms of the money that we spent was kind of important because it was hard to predict when this whole thing would end, right? In the second wave, we saw a very interesting phenomena, which is where a lot of people would order, and our order volumes have been going up despite the pandemic. Despite this wave, I think partly it's attributable to the fact that people are realizing that that food is safe to order, right? In the first wave, there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of fear. In the second wave, people realized that ordering is safe. So food volumes went up, but then our grocery offerings, which is Instamart, has had tremendous growth, right? To the point where the number of people that we can accommodate in the store in order to fulfill orders is now become limited, right? And we have to figure out how to scale not the technology to handle it, but the on-ground operations. And then our concierge service saw like a massive growth of almost phenomenal growth, right? And our concierge service where you can pick up and drop, we saw a lot of different interesting use cases come where people would order over-the-counter medicines for either themselves or for loved ones who needed it. My apartment complex, for example, was declared a containment zone like a couple of weeks ago. It ended a couple of weeks ago, but and a lot of people within that would order medicines for themselves, right? We also saw people who might have had loved ones who had COVID, and they prepare food for them and get a Swiggy person to come pick it up and deliver it to the loved ones. So it was kind of amazing to see the different use cases that people applied for our concierge service. But from a technology perspective, our stacks have been in a position where we can scale it dynamically, and it's been pretty smooth sailing from that perspective.
Okay. Rupesh?
Great. So, when the pandemic started, I think it was a massive situation for us because multiple things happened at that time, and where the demand side demand suddenly surged massively, and on the operation also we had a large reduction in the workforce, etc. So first, let me talk about the scale, the kind of scale that we saw, and what all we did. I think the day when Prime Minister Mr. Modi announced the lockdown countrywide, and I think that was the day when the demand really shot through the roof. We saw the demand going 6x in one day, and nobody really keeps that kind of things ready. So we had a trouble for a day when where our site kind of was very, very unstable on that day, and then we had to really address each and everything on the scale, and we did a lot of things in that one day where I think everyone in the tech organization were just working on addressing various things. So first thing that we did was to make sure that the platform becomes available for people to order the essentials. Okay, so we blocked all the visitor traffic on that day, so that we just want people to come and order. So no bots, and all those traffic were stopped. We scaled all the infra. So some of the infra, which is like let's say the RDS database or the cache, these are not in an auto scale mode. So there we needed to really scale them up vertically, and we really did a lot of changes in this so that we become ready for a 5x scale. So that was on the infra which is not horizontally scalable. Then on the other parts where which is all our services, and so we have a mix of monolithic architecture as well as a bunch of microservices. We have 50 plus microservices today, and we needed to really up the cap that we had defined for the auto scaling, so that it can really grow beyond what we had kept at that time. We also made some changes for scale based on the response time. We were scaling based on the CPU, memory, etc. So we made changes so that it can scale on multiple configurations. So we had to. We also did really aggressive caching of a variety of contents on the CDN as well as in our internal cache, which basically allowed allowed us to really serve a lot of customers. And then quite a few other features which were compute intensive, but they were not really very, very essential. So for example, did you forget or miss something, or some of those kind of features, which are really for upselling or selling few things extra. Those things we said we will let them go because that's not really critical. We want people to get the essentials as quickly as possible. So we disabled those kind of features. We disabled promos, a lot of promos, because they were also very compute intensive, which were adding to the total time that was taking. So we disabled them. So I think some of those measures that we did that really helped us stabilize this thing in a day or two. And then we got ready to really handle the kind of scale. And then after that, the demand was anyway continuing, and there were a lot of other challenges with the massive crisis situation was because of the number of people who were there in the warehouse. They had come down drastically. We actually lost around 80% of our workforce because they had left for their hometowns at just around the time when the lockdown started, and they couldn't come back, and hiring was very, very difficult at that time. So we had really small workforce, and then we had to serve such a large number of customers. So the mantra that all of us imbibed was how to do more with less, and that applied, I think, all across the organization, be it technology, be it operations, and everywhere. So a lot of innovations that went in the product to basically build a lot of efficiency, a lot of optimizations to serve more and more customers, and we can go into that. But I think
are you totally on the cloud?
Yes, we are on AWS.
You're also on AWS, totally. Okay. Mayank, you're also totally on AWS, is it?
We are totally on AWS. Yes.
Okay. There's this question. I remember this was a few years ago, about 3-4 years ago. Flipkart said, they had actually moved from cloud to their own in-house data centers. They said for the kind of scale that they had, the cloud becomes expensive and all. What is your perspective on that? Frankly, Flipkart's position itself might have changed since then. I don't know what the latest is, but what is your position?
I honestly feel that AWS gives a lot of, it simplifies a lot of things and takes away a lot of hard work and pain that is required to maintain and set up such a large infra. And it also gives us a lot of flexibility to auto scale as and when the need arises. So that way we are very, very happy with AWS, and at this point of time, there is no thought going into maintaining your own infra. So,
Mayank, same position?
It's the same position. So, if you think about it, right, while from a pure hardware cost perspective, it may be okay to say that, hey, if you have your own data centers and stuff, you can bring some level of cost efficiency in. But if you look at it from a total cost perspective, right, or someone who has to create the data centers, manage the data centers, the elasticity that you need, right? So if you see, Swiggy's business is very, you'll see peaks in breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And then between these meals, you won't see as much peak, right? So we are actually able to scale up and down our hardware to deal with the peaks and reduce it, right? Whereas if you have your own data center, then you'd have to invest for the higher peak, right? Even from a planning perspective, you'd have to put in a lot of thought because bringing in new hardware and fitting it into a data center has long lead times, right? You don't have to worry about any of those aspects of it. And being on AWS allows us to focus on our core business, right? And allows us to focus on making progress rapidly out there and serving our customer needs and requests that are coming in, right? That gives us that advantage. So at least we don't see a moving off of AWS anytime in the future.
Okay. I must get back to Flipkart and ask them what the latest position is. But I tell you, I mean, this scaling and all are almost instantaneous, is it? I mean, does it's automatically done?
Yes, while the hardware can be provisioned within a few minutes, you also have caches and stuff that need to be warmed up, right? So you need to preload data into the caches and stuff. So the way we've got our entire systems geared is that when we hit certain thresholds, right, and we calculate, a platform team has come up with a mechanism where they calculate the velocity of change that's there, right? And based on that, they actually figure out when to start scaling the hardware out. And then we also have mechanisms in place where not only on a CPU utilization basis, but with some of the software we've developed in-house, even if the IO starts hitting our scale limit or starts getting utilized or this thing, we'll start scaling hardware to deal with that, right? And then because our peaks are well known, we'll make sure that just before the peaks start, right, we've got our hardware scaled automatically. So we actually have a scaling in 3 dimensions, right? One is in the time dimension, when we know that the peaks will start occurring for lunch or for dinner. The second is where if we get unanticipated surges, right, then based on CPU utilization. But then some processes and services are not really dependent on CPU, right? They are more dependent on either memory or on IO. And for those, we've actually got scaling based on the memory or IO utilization that occurs.
And payment comes down the moment you scale down. The payment also, the rates reduce.
Right. So yeah, so so we've got instances that are reserved instances where you pay no matter what you want.
Okay.
And that forms a base layer that we have where we know that even at low demands, we'll need this much hardware anyway. And those reserved instances are at lower cost, right? And then you have instances that scale up and down based on the demand.
Okay.
Right.
And in our case, most of our critical systems, we've actually moved over from RDS to NoSQL. There are very, very few systems left on RDS and relational databases. So that was our design philosophy that we had taken back in 2019 itself, right? And that has really come to our aid because something like DynamoDB, right, can be scaled pretty quickly. So it NoSQL is it's a distributed system, right? So it can horizontally scale as much as you need it to. And we've been very fortunate that even at the database layer, right, we haven't seen any issues because most of the time it's kind of scaled.
Really?
Some of the few critical systems that are left on RDS, which we are still in the process of migrating, that's the only ones that we have to do some level of performance testing and stuff. But we've got alerts in place so that well before we need to, right, we get an alert and we are able to scale it to its sufficient lead time.
Okay. Rupesh, you were saying something?
No. So for us, it's a mix of systems. So some systems do auto scale automatically based on the load, and nobody needs to interfere. And that is for most of the application instances, etc. And then some of the part of the stack, which is the database, cache, or Solar or Elasticsearch, etc. So there we have enough headroom, and then we have enough monitoring, etc. in place. So whenever we need, then we can intervene and then scale that infrastructure fairly quickly. So there again, for these pieces, it doesn't take a long time, and maybe half an hour or 1 hour to scale that up. But then the application instances and all the microservices, there it happens instantaneously as the load increases. And there are some application or some pieces where we have time-based as well, where we know that this is the lean time, so you keep the threshold very low or keep the limit very low. So it's a mix of time-based, load-based, and some of it is all manual.
Okay. Shilpa?
Rupesh and Mayank, if you can talk about some of the solutions that were innovated in Pandemic 2.0, like you see the tokens that are available on the system
Right.
for BigBasket and for Swiggy, some innovations on the concierge side. If you can just take us through some of them.
Sure. So a lot of innovation happened at that time, and each of them actually addressed pain that was faced by customers directly. So I can talk about some of them. So number one issue that people were seeing was the slots, and people were coming and they were not finding slots at all. And it was becoming really a big pain for the customers. And given that we were under a massive constraints on all the sites, we had to really think hard that how do we make this entire thing easy. So one of the first thing that we did was we started making the full day slots. So what that did was, before this, we had around 18 slots throughout the day, each slot having certain capacity. And as soon as the slots would open, it will get filled up in 5 minutes, because there was so many people who were really waiting for it. It was like a lottery. So we said, during this time, everyone is sitting at home. We don't really need to have 18 slots. Let's make one full day slots. And so that was first thing. So that way you don't have to worry about the capacity of each and every slot, and you don't have to worry about configuring them. So that gave us a lot of efficiency. Then another thing that we did was that we made sure that only one order could be given to one customer, so that one customer doesn't block multiple slots, etc. So we restricted that. Then we introduced token system. So token system, what it did was it gave some kind of comfort to the customer that once you have got the token, you are guaranteed that you will be able to place the order on this particular day. So we also gave that time that when exactly you will be able to place this order. And that took care of the major disappointment that the customer were facing related to the token. We also did a fair bit of communication regarding the slots, that when exactly slots are going to open, when exactly you will be able to place the orders. So that eased away, some of the concerns that the customers had. We also did a bunch of things to deliver to as many customers as possible. Okay, so one of the thing was, or that we do today, is when you place one order, you can place add-on orders on the same slot without paying any delivery charge. Now, what that does today is that it is still considered as a separate order, and therefore it goes in a separate pipeline for picking and packing, etc. So what we did was that we looked at that this is taking away some efficiency. So we merge these orders automatically so that it doesn't remain separate order. So that gave us another 20% jump in the efficiency for picking and packing. And that reduced the number of crates or number of saddlebags that would go on the van or bike. So that allowed us to deliver more number of orders in one route. So we could serve more number of customers. We did quite a few things for bulk delivery. We did bulk delivery to societies where we said, okay, nobody is getting the slots. Let's do this. We worked with the RWA, which is Resident Welfare Associations from the society. And we told them that, okay, you guys can collate the orders together for 50 apartments or 100 apartments, and you place one bulk order, and we will pick and deliver to you in one bulk. Because we were struggling with our constraints, and this was a very efficient way to get these things to deliver to as many people as possible with minimum resources on our side. And then it was very heartening to see that the welfare associations were also very supportive in basically coming together, placing the order, and then get distributing it within the society. So that was one thing that we did. We did another thing around using the BB Daily channel. So what we did there was we made a lot of essentials available on BB Daily platform at that time, which and then we started delivering. We started taking order once in a week or twice in a week from the through this channel, again in bulk, and all these things would get delivered to the people in apartments in bulk. So that was another way to serve as many people as possible. We did we built a feature which is called which was priority slots for our loyal customer, which we call gold and platinum customers, because they were also getting very uneasy that we have been using your platform for 5 years or 7 years, and we are struggling. So we did something for that, so that they could also get taken care. And then on top of that, we built a feature for allowing people who were in distress, and those could be people who were senior citizens, or people who were in quarantine, or people who were sick and not in a position to go out. So we did a lot of that. We made sure that irrespective of whether the slots are available or not, we would take order for them, and we will get those orders delivered to them. So a lot of things around that. Another challenge was around out of stock, where a lot of products were going out of stock, supplies were an issue. So first thing that we did was we drastically reduced the number of items in the catalog, so that we are focused on only the essentials, and we only take the order for those essentials. So that again gave us efficiency, that you have lesser number of items on which the orders will come, lesser number of items that need to be picked and packed and delivered. Another thing related to that that we did was change in the way we used to reserve the quantity. Okay, so before this feature, what used to happen was that when you start the checkout process, all the things which you have in the cart, that will get reserved, and that will get reserved for 15 minutes until you make the payment, etc., until the order gets confirmed. Now this 15-minute window, you are locking this items, and when there are so many people coming, this gets reserved for everyone. And what if you are not able to check out? You are not in a position to check out. It really impacts everyone else. So one thing that we saw, which was a very quick fix or low-hanging one, was if the slots itself are not there, we know that people will not be able to check out. So don't even bother to reserve. So just that particular fix actually gave us quite a improvement on out of stock. And then the other thing that we did was something we call dynamic LT. So in our model, what we do is, one is your 5K warehouse, and another one is your LT or DC, where all the long tail orders go. So what was happening was that before we build this feature, if the items go out of stock in the 5K, you're done. You cannot place any order, even though the item is lying in the larger warehouse. So we created this feature so that it will automatically start looking at the stocks in the larger warehouse and then reserve the item there. So that way, even if the item go out of stock in this 5K store from where it is delivered, it will actually get it from the parent warehouse and get it delivered. So with that, the out of stock issue actually, it went down to almost, you can say, 0.5% where the out of stock numbers, or less than that. So a lot of innovations happened. There are a lot more, I mean, total number we calculated. We did around 64 features in 1 month
Really?
to take care of all these enhancement or improvement in the efficiency.
This was April of last year, is it?
Yes, April of last year. And all these learnings that we got and all the features that we built, I think they have been very helpful this time around. And this time around, we didn't see any of the stress. We were able to scale up our things very, very efficiently, very fast. And we had our runbook ready. We knew what to do when the demand surge is happening and what all knobs we can make use of.
Mayank?
Well, so yeah, I think April, May, and June of last year were like fairly challenging, but like, I think the teams in Swiggy really rose to that challenge and like, produced a lot of innovation, right? We had actually moved into a Kanban style where we just said, hey, here are all the different things that we want to prioritize and get done. And like, the teams would just come out together and knock these features off, right? So I think the first issue that we needed to solve for was just the safety concerns, right? Safety concerns that consumers had, safety concerns that drivers had who were going out during the lockdown and risking themselves and stuff, right? So like, one of the features that we introduced was no contact delivery. So within a week, the teams put together this feature where the driver can, if the customer selects that there's a no contact delivery, the driver can leave the bag in a hygienic place, like sanitary place outside their door, take a photograph and upload it, right? And now the customer can see that, hey, the order's been delivered and like, there's a thing, right? And so I think that kind of gave customers and drivers both this feeling of safety, right? That there's no direct contact while handing off food. Second thing, though, the second thing was like, because Swiggy operates as a gig economy and we don't have a fixed workforce, and because we are distributed in like 500 plus cities, as drivers wanted to join, right, before they'd have to go to the office or the hub, go through all the formalities in order to be able to join, and then like, we'd have training videos for them and stuff. So we very quickly had to revamp our system to say that drivers can now do self-serve sign up, right? They'll fill in all the details, take a photograph of their ID cards, and we'll use that in order to be able to onboard them. And then like, we took the training videos and broke them down into contextual pieces. And every time we rolled out and like, we'd have these videos for them, short 2 or 3 minute videos that they can use in the context of an order, right? So for example, if like, there's a first time that the driver has a COD order, right? Then we show a video that shows them how to handle a COD order at that point while they're waiting at the restaurant. The other concern that people had, like, so back in last year, temperature was a primary gauge that people had for saying, like, is there a chance, potential for infection or not, right? So we worked with our restaurant partners and like, we had someone out there who would measure the temperature of the driver every time he came in. And like, we'd upload that into our system and like, consumers could now see what the temperature of the driver was who was coming to deliver their food, right? And a lot of associations actually also appreciated that, like, consumers appreciated it. Associations were like, hey, because the temperature is there, they like, they would allow the drivers to come in when they may not have otherwise. We also made sure that our drivers had masks, right? So though not a tech solve, like, we ensured that drivers we had distributed masks to and sanitizers to drivers. And in places where we couldn't get the distribution to them, we had asked them to just purchase it and expense it, right? But then the thing that we also did was like, we'd have them take a selfie at a random point in time. And we had AI-driven systems that would make sure and ensure that, like, that the mask compliance was there, right? So that would again give, like, us a strong indicator that, hey, the drivers were operating in a safe manner, both for themselves and for consumers. After we had rolled out a lot of this, like, the next challenge that we ran into was that because in that wave, like, a lot of restaurants had shut down. So like, consumers were ordering from a much smaller set of restaurants that were still open. And so drivers would be crowding around that restaurant, right? And obviously that's neither safe for them, nor the police and authorities happy about that. So we actually changed our assignment systems to say that, hey, like, when there are too many drivers, right, we'll delay assigning any more drivers to that order until that queue clears up, right? So that would help make sure that the number of drivers in a restaurant would be constrained to a set that wouldn't create crowding, and that the drivers were actually able to do the 6 feet social distancing and stuff, right? So I think a lot of these kind of put together started addressing the safety concerns and the fact that that we couldn't our hubs and our offices were not open to onboard drivers. So we used a lot of these technology solves to overcome those quickly. Then from a driver perspective, we also had set up a separate queue with our agents. So drivers who ran into roadblocks or stuff, right, call and request help on how to get there, right? And the drivers and customers would quickly chat and be able to reroute and figure it out. The other innovations that we did was we had been investing in our own location intelligence platform. There was a layer where we had started building our own POIs, points of interest, apartment complex, gates and stuff, right? And one of the other challenges we saw in the early days of the pandemic particularly was that a lot of apartments would have multiple entry points, but during the lockdown, they would shut most of the gates and only keep one gate open. So drivers who are new to that area or who are familiar with having multiple entry points now suddenly had to had to now be directed to one particular one, right? So our investments in our location platform, our location intelligence platform, really paid off, where we were able to mark the fact and inform drivers that this is the entry point you need to go to for this thing, right? Even for restaurants, right? Because a lot of our restaurants were now onboarding again in a self-serve manner. Very often they wouldn't have the location correct, right? And in a in a non-lockdown world, this wasn't a problem because drivers could just ask for directions and we get guided to the restaurant. But if in the lockdown world where there aren't too many people on the street, right, they'd have no one to ask and they'd struggle sometimes to find the restaurants. So we again use signals like when the drivers reach the restaurant, they'd say that there's we've arrived at the restaurant, right? And we crowdsource those signals and correct the addresses dynamically so that the next set of drivers wouldn't face an issue. And they'd be led to the exact point where the actual restaurant was. So I think
there's a lot of AI, ML and all that you use, is it?
So Swiggy is AI driven, it's AI first. So practically all of our algorithms, all of our systems heavily leverage AI and ML. We use AI for time predictions, we use AI for distance predictions that we show to customers. Even on the storefront, even on the consumer app side, right? When you search for a dish, we actually use a food graph or a food intelligence graph to try and find dishes you might be interested in, right? Because suppose you say I'm interested in a South Indian dish, right? Now that's still easy because you can map a lot of dishes and say that, hey, these are South Indian. Now what if you say that I want a spicy meal, right? What does spicy really mean for you versus for me, right? Or if you say that, hey, I really want the other thing we actually use it for is we need to classify dishes into dish families. So all pizzas, for example, would be classified into pizza, right? And when we group orders together, we have to be careful about which orders we can group together, right? You don't want to have a really hot meal and an ice cream put into the same order, right? So things like this is so Swiggy is very heavily uses AI and ML in practically everything that we do, right?
Okay.
Even for
Rupesh,
fraud
sorry, go on. You're saying something?
For fraud signals and determining fraud is taking place and stuff, we heavily rely on AI signals.
Yeah. Okay. Rupesh, AI ML.
So yes, we do make use of a lot of places where it plays a very important role. And there are a bunch of things. Some of them are very standard, which is, I mean, if you bought this, I mean, basically similar items or recommendation engine, then this inventory management. So in inventory management, I think it's become very important to predict that what is the inventory that should be there for each of the SKUs, and especially with a mix of FMCG and perishable, it becomes very important to compute this in a very smart way, that how much to be stored. Because if you store more, then you will end up with things going stale, and you will end up wasting a lot of things. Or if you compute less, store less, then you will end up with out of stock. So it becomes very important. So this is like a lifeline for us. We do make use of it for computing what is the crate number or saddlebags, etc. Computing for the routing. So there are multiple places where we use that, and it becomes a very, very important part of all the decision making that happens.
Okay, Rupesh, this question is for you from Chandrabhan Giri. From a tech standpoint and with an overview of how BigBasket works in the backend, do you see it enter instant delivery like Dunzo and Swiggy?
So we do have a partnership with Dunzo, and I think we do deliver through that. And I think a lot of BigBasket orders get delivered through Dunzo, which is instant. And I think every day we get quite a bunch of orders from there. So yes, that option is definitely there. Now, what all we can build in future, we don't know.
Okay. Shilpa, you're muted.
Yeah, hi. We are just waiting for, this question is coming from Abhishit. What level of automation is present in the customer service of Swiggy and BigBasket? Things like chatbots, automated refund decisions, etc.
So in Swiggy, a lot of our chatbots are fairly automated in terms of how we address customer requirements. If they need to know where the order is, right? We'll gather the signals and be able to respond to the customer out there. There are various scenarios where, we grant automatic refund based on the customer signal, where the order is in the order journey, whether there's actual delay or not. And then obviously, if the customer is not happy with the chatbot response, they're still free to reach out to the agents. This year, we are actually investing heavily in NLP-based systems to make the conversational flow with customers a lot more natural and a lot more intuitive for them, right? So I think there's a fair bit of automation and coverage.
Not started yet, is it, NLP?
We've been experimenting with it in the last, in the last year. But we want the NLP models to be of fairly high quality before we actually release it out to customers, right? We end up having a very high focus on the customer experience, and the bar on the customer experience has to meet something that we are happy with before we release it out. And the NLP models are fairly close to that, but not quite there yet, right? The other thing you have to think through is also the experience from a customer perspective, because there'll be different scenarios that we'll release the NLP models out for different use cases and scenarios. So how does the traditional chatbot versus the NLP work in conjunction with each other is something we are thinking through the experience.
Okay. Rupesh, automation.
So we do have the chatbots for both the application, which is BigBasket as well as BB Daily, and fairly good amount of automation workflows, which take care of most common needs of the customer, which happen in an automated way, which can take care of, let's say, where is my order, ETAs, cancellations, returns, refunds, etc. And we take a lot of signals from the customer's past behavior and the order, etc., to make sure that it doesn't lead to any kind of fraud, etc. And we make sure that things happen without any intervention required from a CS. And then at some point we decide that, okay, this needs to be handled by some person. And then this entire information, whatever has been gathered in this journey so far, that becomes available to the CS person automatically. So when he looks at the case, he already has all the information. He doesn't have to ask. So that has reduced the time taken to serve a customer drastically. So we did that for both BigBasket app as well as BB Daily. And it's a mix of, NLP based thing as well as decision tree based thing. So fairly good amount of automation on the chatbots.
Okay. Give us an idea of the kind of skills that you hire. And are you still hiring?
Yes, so we are hiring, and we are hiring. Actually, right now we want to really scale up our tech talent. So we are going to see a lot more activity on the hiring front. And then the key thing that we look for is very, very strong problem solving skill, great attitude, and a really good computer science fundamentals. I think these are the key things that we look at. And then obviously, depending on which area you would work on, I think those specific skills, whether it is for mobile app, whether it is for web, or whether it is for server side, understanding the distributed systems and how do you build scalable systems. I think those are the things that we'll look for depending on the need where we need to hire. But the fundamentals are something that we don't compromise on at all, and that's something that we would really want to.
Okay, Mayank.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is similar, right? I think the primary for us is problem-solving skills, because a lot of our systems are actually fairly complex in nature, right? And changes that we make will have a network effect or second-order effects. If we change our assignment algorithm, for example, right? Even just the way we measure the impact of that experiment is fairly complex, right? We've kind of had cases where, we have to measure it, like we'll turn on the experiment on and off across multiple days, because you can't do a standard A/B testing when you're using a single fleet and trying to bifurcate that, right? At the moment you bifurcate the fleet, you already have different results than the original, right? And then when we do it across different days, right, you have to take into account the effect that rain might have had if rain fell in one day, or if there was a festival in the middle of the experiment, or if the utilization of drivers has changed, right? How do you get the right statistical significance? So problem solving is critical for a critical part of our interview process, right? Beyond that, we look for people who have some experience in distributed systems for the more senior roles, right? Like for the SD1 role, for example, it's something that we feel that if you're smart, you can pick it up. The more senior you get, and then obviously we look for people who can code in at least one of the object-oriented languages. We don't necessarily hold to any particular object-oriented language that you are familiar with, because if you know one, then you can always pick up another one, right? But then as you get to more senior roles, we also look at things like, their ability to design systems like at an SD4 or principal engineer level, right? How do they design systems? How do they think of fault tolerance? How do they think of failure scenarios and stuff, right? So a lot of those are part of our hiring process.
Okay.
That we look for as skills. And then sorry.
How do you determine problem solving skills? You give them problems to solve, is it? Do you?
Correct. So we give them problems to solve. And some of these are open-ended problems where we'll describe the scenario and then they have to solve for that. And then if they aren't able to get it, because interview scenarios are always hard on people, we will provide hints and see how well they're picking up the hints and stuff, right? And what we are in the problem solving round, what we are assessing is not necessarily whether you hit the solution or not, but the thought process that has gone behind it, right?
Okay. I have a couple of questions here. One is for you again, Mayank. Shukti Mukherjee wants to know, what new experiences are we looking forward to as a customer of Swiggy?
So I think, if you look at it, there's definitely a lot of work that is still going to building our search and relevance engines and stuff, and continuing to create the food graph that we talked about. But from a customer perspective, some of the new things that we are looking at is saying that how do we make your ability to find the food that you want a lot easier, right? We are starting to expand the radius of restaurants that you can order from. So before we'd limit the ability of customers to order up to 6 km. As our systems have become more sophisticated and our fleet efficiencies have become higher, we are opening it up to longer and longer distances.
Is that the reason? I thought it was because the roads are relatively free now and you can move faster.
No, for us, it's all about the customer experience and what customers want, and our ability to service them. Right now, the more you open up the restaurants and the more you open up the distances, like you only have a limited supply of drivers, right? And unlike most e-commerce companies, the challenge that we have at Swiggy is that you can't say that, hey, if you place the order and we don't have enough drivers, it's okay, we'll give you your order 2 hours later or 3 hours later, right? You can't deliver to them in a slot, right? People expect their food pretty quickly within 30 to 45 minutes, in general. And beyond that, they just start getting hungrier and angrier, right? So ours is a very on-demand, our entire business is both very hyperlocal and very on-demand in that perspective, right? Typically from the time you place the order, our assignment algorithms only have a couple of minutes to figure out which order should be assigned to what drivers. At peak times, we have a graph where almost 4 million edge combinations are evaluated every 2 minutes in order to figure out what's the most optimal order allocations to drivers, right? And then but if you run out of drivers, right, then suddenly you will end up with having to stop taking any new orders completely. Right? Because if you take an order and you aren't able to fulfill it in the promise you've made, then customers are understandably angry about that, right? So a lot of our algorithms, a lot of our things goes about how do we increase fleet efficiency with the drivers we have, so that we can open up a wider and wider selection for people.
Shilpa?
We have this question from Sangeeta Madan Gopal. Will Swiggy get into delivery of groceries and vegetables again like it did during last year's lockdown, not through Genie?
Yes, so we actually do have an offering called Instamart that does the guy of groceries as an offering. One of the lessons that we had in the first COVID wave, right, when we had actually opened up groceries all across the country and it was a marketplace model, was that it's very, very hard to handle the customer experience and expectations when you just go to random grocery stores, right? We have very little control over things like the quality of items out there, right? Or even the choice that customers have, right? So if a customer orders, for example, a packet of biscuits, right? Now that seems like a very trivial order, but when you actually get into it, and there are 2 different sizes of biscuits, right? So for some customers, it will matter whether it's one or the other. We also saw a lot of out of stock items and stuff, right? So we actually shifted our strategy to say that we will own our own stores, dark stores. And we are in the process of rapidly rolling those out, right? So we are already live in Gurgaon and Bangalore, and that has seen really, really great reception from our customers. And now we are rapidly expanding to other cities now that we've got the experience that we want nailed down properly.
I have a question from Anjali Singh. Interesting question for both of you. On the delivery partner side app, how do you make them accessible and easy to understand for these delivery partners?
Got it.
Rupesh, you want to go first? Okay.
Okay.
Rupesh,
So the delivery app that we have, I think we have created a very elaborate training module, which makes it very, very easy for all our CEs. And one thing that we have established and that we have really nailed down is the process, whether it is in the warehouse or whether it is the CE. Each and every step is very, very well defined, and each and every action that needs to be done is very well defined. So CE and we spend a lot of time and effort in training all the workforce. So that way, the CE is very well equipped to decide what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. So he would do the things on the app. He would also, and it's not only restricted to the app. I mean, when you would, it's about giving the entire experience. You would see when the CE comes to deliver to your doorstep, he would, the way he greets you, the way he wears the gloves, the way he neatly arranges things. Each and everything is part of the process that we have defined. The CE will never call the customer. CE is all trained that he will always talks to the CS, and that someone from customer service will reach out to the customer. So that way the communication always remains very clear and very crisp, and it doesn't get into any kind of communication gap or any kind of issues there. So I think it is the process which is making a lot of difference in giving the best experience to the customer. And then we constantly make a lot of changes or keep evolving the delivery app to make life really easy. The interface that we have for the CE is very, very simple, so that there is not much of learning curve, and a very intuitive interface through which the delivery person can perform the action. Today, yes, we don't do it on multiple language, but the things are so intuitive, and a lot of images, and just the action that needs to be done. I think it's working out pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, the language is English, is it?
Language is English.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayank?
So at Swiggy, we I think over the last 2.5 years, we've put a lot of focus into the design of our delivery app. One of the things that we've ensured is when we create the mocks, right, for the app, for the engineers to go build those experiences, we make sure that even the mocks are at the same screen resolution and size that most of the delivery partners will be using, right? So we use slightly lower end devices to make sure that what we put out there is easily viewable by drivers with lower end devices and stuff. We do a lot of testing with drivers on the mocks we create and the experiences we want, where we'll show the new screen and we'll ask a few questions, so the product managers, the designers will ask questions about what the driver understands from that screen. What the driver, they'll start asking other questions and see whether the driver can locate it in that mock, what they need to do. So we have those as part of our entire design process to be able to roll it out. Over the last year, we also created a localization experience where any new feature we roll out is localized. And then slowly we are starting to backport the localization to existing parts of our screen, starting with some of the more critical ones first. At the same time, all of our training videos and stuff, right? Because we don't have driver partners who are employees of Swiggy, but more people who will come and work at will, right? So it's a gig economy. Driver partners will come join us. They'll sometimes drop off because they need to go home. So they kind of it's a very flexible fleet in that sense of people being able to come in and leave. And we don't mandate any attendance or stuff, right? Everything we do is driven by incentives that we offer to them. So from that perspective, we have to make sure that all the training that we do to the drivers is through video training that we can do, so that we can quickly reach out to drivers, even in this scenario where all of our offices are shut and we can't do in-person trainings. So our videos are always our videos are now contextualized to the situation. So for example, when a new driver partner onboards, right, we'll show them on day one, we'll show them 3 or 4 short videos that allow them to do the job on that first day, right? On the second day, we'll allow them to to figure out how the payments and stuff work, right? And so we give this information to them in bite-sized chunk. But then the other example that I gave, right, when they're exposed to a new situation, how do we roll out a bite-sized video that they can absorb how to handle that particular situation is also done. And all these videos are localized in nature, right? So that we do localize into more popular languages.
Okay.
We have this question from Rajneesh Sinha. What kind of IT talent does Swiggy and BigBasket generally hire and look for? Developers, DBA, data analytics, or others? Do you outsource some part of the technical development and maintenance to third parties?
You answered a bit of it earlier, but there's something you can add to that?
So in our case, we hire on the development side, as I said, we hire people who have problem-solving skills and at least one exposure to one object-oriented language. Now, Swiggy internally uses a combination of Java and Go as the languages that we operate in. And then on the UI side, we actually have a slightly bigger mix, right? We have people who, on the DE app side, for example, we use React Native, but then on the consumer app side, a lot of screens are very, very heavyweight in what we do. And we use native Android development or native iOS development for that. We do have a couple of DBAs because we do have some RDS stacks still there. But the fact that a lot of our things are moved over to a DynamoDB, right, allows us to operate with a very lean DBA staff. We also have DevOps, a DevOps team and a platform team that that work in conjunction to come up with a lot of the platform solutions and stuff, right? So for example, the platform team has invested in a system that does automated CI/CD pipelines. And while that sounds trivial, a lot of senses, it's about having a framework where when you promote it to test, right, we are moving to a mode where we'll generate the data, we'll bring up environments on demand, generate the data, the test data into those environments, and then run the regression tests on top of that, right? And then if the regression tests pass, right, only then it'll get promoted to the next level and tear down the environment on demand. So a lot of these things are things that we invest in. And there's a platform team that does it. There's also an SDET team that builds automated tests. From a engineering excellence perspective, we really believe strongly in making sure that all of our unit functional tests are automated and owned by developers. And our integration and end-to-end tests are also automated by SDET teams. And they also help invest in the frameworks to be able to build, to make developer productivity higher, right? So I think a lot of these are the skills that we have. And then we also we also have developers who are strong in the security realm, and their charter is to figure out all of the security systems that we need in place in Swiggy to protect customer data. Right. The last thing, we also have a very, very strong data science and ML team because we are AI first in practically everything we do. We have an analytics team that does the analytics, and they go actually very, very deep in order to figure out the to figure out the insights that we need in order to build the next set of products and stuff. Or if something is happening on the ground, right? Because of all these second order and network effects that we have, figuring out why a metric suddenly went off the rails, right, will require deep insights for the analytics team to solve. The analytics team also owns some of the systems around forecasting demand versus supply and things, right? And then we have a data platform team that builds the warehouse, and they kind of ingest all of the data we have. Swiggy is very, very heavy in the data and using data in order to make decisions. So the data platform team will ingest the data and optimize the storage of the data to reduce costs. So I think those are all the various functions that we kind of have just on the technology side, right? And then the product managers obviously will be there. And
Rupesh, all time, but quick one, Rupesh, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think all the things that Mayank said holds true for us as well. I think at each and everything that he said, we have the similar setup at our end. Okay. In terms of the languages, I think again we are almost language agnostic. We use Java, Node.js, Python, Go. So it's a good mix of languages that we use for our microservices on the backend side. And on the UI, we need developers, or we have developers on React.js primarily, and so most of our front end, which is web or PWA, so that's on React.js. And then On the mobile app, it's for iOS, it's a mix of Objective-C and Swift. We are in the process of moving to Swift completely, so it will be all Swift. And then on Android, again, it's Kotlin and Java, and it's a mix right now.
Okay.
And then a whole lot of other things which are there in the platform. And MySQL, Postgres, Kafka, Aerospike, Solar, Elasticsearch. So I mean, all the things which you need in a distributed system. I think all of that we need, and we need skill on that. We are massively into Kubernetes and containerization, and the platform team really takes care of all the infrastructure, including this Kubernetes cluster, to make sure that every microservice that we build can scale really well. And then automation, again, we really believe in getting as much automation as possible, or end-to-end automation for everything, so that the time to release can be reduced as much as possible, and we don't end up spending a lot of time in doing things in manual testing. So a lot of investment again on analytics, data platform, data science. I think all the areas that Mayank talked about, I think we have a similar need, and we continue to hire. So if you guys are really looking for some exciting work, please send us your resume.
BigBasket.
Two more questions.
Oh God, yeah.
This is from Mohana Chandramouli. Is there any technical logistics reason behind not having female delivery partners? Can we expect women to take up these roles for Swiggy and BigBasket in the near future?
I also thought of this question.
In Swiggy, we actually do have women delivery partners. Now, because of government regulations, they can't continue operating beyond some time limit, right? I think 7 p.m. or 8 p.m.
or something. Yeah.
So assignment systems and our systems actually take cognizance of that if it's a woman delivery partner, we'll make sure that the last order delivery, the last order that they have is 30 minutes before the regulated time, right? But we actually have a number of people, the number of women delivery partners on the Swiggy thing, right? We also in one of the city, in a couple of the cities, the city teams have actually even hired a couple of disabled people, differently abled people who are doing delivery for Swiggy, right? So we do work to have an inclusive environment, not just within our tech teams, but even at a broader level.
Right, and at BigBasket, we actually took on a special effort to include more and more women in warehouse. So in the corporate, I think we have always had a fairly good share of women, whether it is in tech or business side or different kind of roles. But in warehouse or delivery, we didn't have so many. So last year we took the initiative to put a really large focus on this, and we have got a fairly good number of women employees in the warehouses who are actually doing the picking and packing, and it is in a very safe environment because you're within the warehouse, and it's something that that is much safer to them. We do have some delivery, some CEs, women CEs, who are actually doing the delivery with bike. But yes,
not too many come on their own, is it?
Sorry?
Not too many. You don't get too many applicants from women, is it?
For delivery,
on the delivery side?
I mean, I don't have the complete information, but in delivery, we have much lesser number of women. But hopefully, we will see that number grow, because we are putting a very conscious effort on including them more and more.
Shilpa, what's the other question?
This question is from Shashi Kumar. Can you give us a brief about how delivery charge of an order is calculated?
So on Swiggy, it's a number of factors that come into play. It depends on the distance that you are from the restaurant. because we do have to compensate our delivery partners also fairly. But as part of the cost for delivery is actually subsidized by Swiggy, right? I don't think a lot of people realize that. But the cost that we have to pay to the drivers is a lot higher than the delivery charges we actually collect for most of the orders. Some of it is driven by so a lot of it is this thing. Some of it is driven by whether you signed up for a super program or not, right? So if you signed up for the super program, then we kind of factor that in and make sure that we honor the terms of the super program. Some of it is also factored in by the fact that some of the restaurant partners that we tie up with will want us to subsidize the cost of delivery from their end, right, in order to get additional businesses. So I think all these kind of come together in order to figure out what the right delivery charge is for the customer, right? And we have a different team in Swiggy that figures out the right pricing models and stuff for all of this.
And I mean, for us, it is much simpler model. I mean, it's just based on your total order value. If the order value is more than 1,000 rupees, then or 1,200 rupees, then the delivery charge is free. There is no delivery charge. And if you are a BB Star member, then that amount comes down to 600 rupees. So as long as your order value is more than that, it is free. Otherwise, it is a fixed value, which is 50 rupees typically, 30 rupees or 50 rupees, depending on the city. And then we do have some special vouchers, etc., running, which will give you the delivery for free for, let's say, first time customer, or with some special vouchers, etc. But it's much simpler model, because we don't want to be very complex for the customer, because customer really feels bad in paying the delivery charge, right? And we want to make it very simple, so that it's easy for customer to understand.
Okay, now we are well past the time that we told all of you. There's still one more question, but I think we can end. What Shilpa?
Yeah, I have no questions at my end, so yeah.
Okay. I have one, which again from Chandragiri, who had previously also asked a question. He wants to know, how do you manage during unexpected events like rains? What technical solution in use currently? Last question. We'll make that the last question. Is there anything at all about
Swiggy's end? At least, we have two signals that we use for rains. One is we've tied up with a partner who gives us weather predictions and will give us a signal when rain comes in. The other is if a city team indicates that, hey, there's rain happening on the ground, right? Because at the end of the day, weather predictions are, as we all know, right, there's a little bit of inaccuracy in those sometimes. Once we get the signal for rain, our systems deal with it in a multiple different manners, right? Our time prediction models, for example, will start consuming the rain signals and adjusting the time predictions that we make for customers. Our tracking screen will display to customers that there's rain to indicate to them that the orders may be delayed, because no matter how much you try and predict it, right, the intensity of rain and stuff will still be challenging, right? So drivers may have to reroute themselves if it's a waterlogged area or not, right? So we communicate to customers that, hey, there's rain in that area, and therefore, there might be a delay. Our pricing systems take rain into account. Driver payout systems actually take the rain into account and actually give the drivers a hardship charge, because they are out there in rains, helping to deliver hot meals to our customers. While we may sit in the comfort of our homes, right, the drivers out there are cold and wet and miserable, right? But they still deliver food with a smile on their face, right? So we do give them a hardship charge when there's a rain that we call a rain surge. So a lot of these systems start responding to that signal when it comes in.
Okay. Maybe you can suddenly a lot of this. Okay, Rupesh, why don't you take this question from Manpreet Singh?
Sure.
Does the back-end tech at Swiggy BigBasket account for the fact that the gig delivery partner might also be serving orders from other apps?
So for us, it's not possible. I think all the Cs who are
just yours.
They are
just yours.
The stars. Yes.
Okay.
So either they are on our payroll or they are on the on EP model, which we call, which is entrepreneur model, where the payout happens based on the number of deliveries, but they are full time with us.
Okay. Mayank, is that something that an issue for you?
Yeah, so technically, when the drivers on the app, they're supposed to be tied to a single app for the duration of the shift. Now, in reality, that some drivers will kind of have dual apps running and stuff, right? And a lot of our systems have actually adopted to that, right? So if a driver, for example, wants to go pick up another order, right, he may either log off or stop duty, and that's a signal to us to stop assigning. But if he wants to keep the stay logged in and keep the app running, one of the checks we have is that he can't reject more than a certain number of orders, right, without a penalization in place. So that's a disincentive for him to stop taking orders just because he's trying to just, right? So there are some of these systems we have in place, but for the most part, our system has evolved to deal with the fact that we'll have drivers logging in or logging out with a little bit less predictability than a lot of other e-commerce companies are used to, right? And most of our systems adapt and deal with those. Again, a lot of it is driven by the AI models and the predictive models we have in place that allow us to do these to continue our service with us.
Okay. I think we shall end it there. We're 16 minutes past 7 o'clock. Thanks so much. Suddenly a lot of questions came up towards the end from the audience. Hey, Mayank, Rupesh, thank you both from Shilpa and me, and from Techies. Thanks a lot. We learned a lot about your operations, how you manage all of this with technology. Amazing kind of what technology can do today. So once again, thank you, Mayank, Rupesh.
Thank you, Mayank.
Thank you so much. It was great pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Mayank. Lot to understand about Swiggy as well. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure being on the platform, on the webinar. Thanks, Sujit. Thanks.
Two great companies. Yeah, congratulations. You guys have done a wonderful job.
Thank you.